If you watch my videos, then you probably know that I think Pokémon Horizons has kind of dropped in quality since the time skip, and that's not to say Horizons sucks or anything, it's still a great show, but for a lot of us it's just not living up to how peak it felt before the time skip. Most significantly, I think it's a writing issue. Horizons was written so well before the time skip, but afterwards it feels like the writing has really fell apart. But why? What exactly is going wrong? I've spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, but recently it finally dawned on me what it could be. I think there's one core issue behind all of it, the root cause behind all the issues Horizons has been facing since the time skip, and is something that can be summarized in just one word: commitment. Or a lack of commitment. The writer's decision to do a time skip to actually let the characters grow up is a huge, almost unheard of swing for the Pokemon anime. It's something fans have wanted for decades, something that was never allowed with Ash. But when you do something that huge and that game-changing, you have to commit to it, in all ways. You can't half-bake it, you can't half-heart it, because then it's a swing and a miss, it doesn't work. And unfortunately, I think that's exactly where the writers are going wrong. I think they've come up with some really incredible, bold, new ideas since the time skip, but the issue is that they're too afraid to actually commit to those ideas. It's like Horizons keeps setting up huge points, but then refuses to live in the consequences of them. Let me give you more examples than you could probably ever imagine to prove my point, many of which I bet you haven't even thought of. First, Spinel framing the Horizon Voltaclers as criminals. Spinel quite literally doxed our heroes' faces and their home. He turned the entire world against them, accusing them of being eco-terrorists, criminals. So you would have thought that would have an unimaginable impact on just about everything. Our heroes shouldn't be safe operating in public spaces, they should be seen as villains wherever they go, it should be having a massive impact on their mental health, on their emotions. But nope, not really. This just doesn't happen. Spinel framing them as criminals has virtually no impact on the storyline or on their characters. They still act completely the same and face no real backlash on screen. So do you see what I mean here? The writers had a phenomenal idea with framing our heroes to be criminals, making them on the run, but then they were just too scared to fully commit to it and actually follow through with it. So instead it fell completely flat. Here's another example, Roy catching the Black Rayquaza. This happening should have been a series-defining, game-changing moment. Roy finally achieved his dream and caught it, but then, literally 2 minutes later, Rayquaza just leaves. It flies away to find the other 6 heroes, despite the other 6 heroes knowing where they need to go already. Roy doesn't get to use Rayquaza, he doesn't get to have it on his team, he doesn't get to bask in the glory, the story doesn't change whatsoever as a result. Even the posters for the final arc are refusing to stay Rayquaza as Roy's Pokemon. So once again, the writers want Roy to catch Rayquaza, but then they're too scared for it to actually be his Pokemon. They're unable to commit to it, they wiggle out of it by having Rayquaza leave immediately after. How about another example? The effects of Lquium. The writers have been screaming at us for a year now that the Lquium is unfathomably dangerous, that it literally mutilates and destroys the bond between trainer and Pokemon. It even emphasized that Lquium can erase the bonds between Pokemon too, and that was a huge, horrifying plot moment when it happened to the 6 heroes. But then once again, the writers were too scared to actually commit to the idea, because despite the villains using Strong Spheres 100 times, somehow they can still Mega Evolve their Pokemon. You know, Mega Evolution, the gimmick this 100% reliant on the strong personal bond between a trainer and Pokemon? Shouldn't Lqium erase that, or get in the way of it at the very least? Once again, the writers aren't committing to the ideas they're setting up. Even the 6 heroes having their bonds with each other erased and attacking each other is immediately forgotten 2 minutes later. It's rough, dude. They even started setting up a storyline of Lqium infecting Pokemon all around the world, but then they just randomly dropped that too. Like, dude, if the writers can't commit to any of the ideas they have for the Lqium, any of the stuff they're setting up, then how on earth are we meant to take it as an actual threat whatsoever? It completely undermines it. Now for one of the biggest examples, everything related to Friede. When Friede supposedly died just before the time skip, it was meant to be a huge emotional turning point for the show, but once again the writers never truly committed to it, because outside of the Aula episode, we don't really see any emotional fallout from what happened. We don't spend time with the characters processing Friede's death, we don't see them struggling with grief or guilt or feeling like they failed to save him. Even Captain Pikachu, Friede's life partner, feels barely affected by what happened, and that's a major issue, man. If you're gonna make the choice to kill off a main character, you have to be willing to live in that. You have to let it have consequences. But unfortunately, Horizons, post-time skip, just doesn't do that on screen. Outside of 2 episodes, it doesn't commit to showing the effects or impact of it. I mean, heck, dude, they were even unable to commit to Friede dying in the first place. Because, surprise, Friede didn't actually die. And let me tell you, the writing behind his survival and his absence for a whole year is really poor and underwhelming. So now it just feels like the entire Friede's supposed death arc was fully contrived. It had no purpose beyond dramatic impact, shock value. Once again, the writers came up with a really bold, great idea, but then weren't willing to commit to it in the ways they should have done. Another big example that I haven't really seen many people talking about is how frivolously and endlessly the post-time skip era is just throwing things at the wall out of nowhere for sheer plot convenience. For example, Diana suddenly having a Pecha run, Hamba suddenly having a Blood Moon Ursaluna, Amethio suddenly having complete form Zygarde, the Explorers suddenly having Mega Evolutions. All of these are things that before the time skip would have gotten tons of screen time. They're plot developments that would have happened on screen, rather than just being a throwaway line or a very brief flashback. But now, since the time skip, it feels like these things just spawn out of thin air. The writers aren't committing to actually exploring or developing the ideas on screen. The characters just randomly show up with these things out of nowhere because the plot demands it, and that completely destroys the level of hype and storytelling that should be behind such huge elements. Now let's quickfire some more examples. Let's feature a Blueberry Academy training arc where our heroes have to train harder than ever to defeat the Explorers. But let's only really feature Roy and Alt training while Liko and Dot essentially stand around doing nothing. Once again, the writers aren't fully committing to the idea. Let's prove that Roy is on another level in terms of strength after the time skip by having him defeat the strongest champion of Paldea, Nemona, his rival. But then let's backtrack immediately after and make Roy lose against her in all future battles. The writers don't commit to Roy's strength level. On that topic, let's emphasize that our heroes have to be as powerful as the 6 heroes to power up Pogogo and erase the Lquium, and let's make them achieve that strength level. But wait, we can't actually have them that strong, because then they'll steamroll the Explorers. So let's just ignore it and make them struggle in every battle immediately after again. No commitment to our heroes' power levels. Oh, and let's maybe hint that Roy could be an aura wielder, but let's not actually commit to it by exploring the idea whatsoever. Let's have Lucius entrust Pogogo to Liko to be its new trainer, but we don't want Liko to have a Pokemon that strong, so she'll virtually never get to actually battle using Pogogo. It can just be an accessory. Once again, the writers aren't committing to the ideas they're setting up after the time skip. The writers even have commitment issues to the stuff they're doing with the villains too. Pre-time skip, they were clearly teasing Coral and Sidian eventually switching sides, but then post-time skip, they backtracked on it and made Coral and Sidian utterly callous and evil to a new level. They failed to commit to the redemption they were setting up. And then they even failed to commit to the failure of commitment, because they changed their mind on that too. Now they've returned once again to setting up Coral and Sidian redemption, probably against Spinel in the final battle. The lack of commitment is just so messy and back and forth. And the writers are also trying so hard to set Spinel up as some truly evil mastermind who's always 52 steps ahead of our heroes. A villain who's willing to go to any extreme to stop our heroes, including killing them. But then the writers aren't willing to commit to that either, because if they did, they know that our heroes would have been defeated ages ago. So instead, they write Spinel to just sit around doing absolutely nothing for the past 45 episodes. And even when he gets opportunities to eliminate our heroes, like when all their Pokemon were defeated against the 6 heroes, or when he literally knows where their airship is stationed outside of Lqua, he just chooses to do nothing, for no reason at all. Once again, the writers are trying to set Spinel up as some evil, intelligent supervillain, but then they're just unable to commit to the idea. I think I've given way too many examples at this point, but I will give one more about the most recent episode. The episode really drilled in that the mission to Lqua to erase the Lquium is genuinely life or death. The fate of the world is at risk here, it's now or never. Our heroes have to keep their 18 Terra Pokemon alive to reach the center of Lqua to fuel Pogogo to erase the Lquium, while the Explorers throw all they have at our heroes to stop them. So with the situation being so grave and the stakes being the highest they've ever been, why the heck does it feel like our heroes aren't doing all they could be doing to ensure the victory? Example number 1, Dot and Nemona sending out their Terra Pokemon and putting the whole mission at risk for no reason at all, rather than Penny or Nemona sending out any of their other 4 Pokemon each who aren't part of the Terra team. Example number 2. Why did our heroes leave half of the Ryzen Volt Tacklers on the airship to stand around doing nothing? Molly is literally a nurse who could have came with them to heal their Pokemon and save the Terra Team members from being knocked out. Ludlow's literally a superhero. Not to mention Wyatt, Perrin, Murdoch, Orla. All of these characters have so many Pokemon who could have came with to help guard the Terra Pokemon. Surely every extra Pokemon, every extra hand they can get is absolutely worthwhile when the stakes are this high. Example number 3. Why did our heroes not meet up with the 6 heroes and Amitheo's group before entering Lqua, so they could all strike together at their maximum strength rather than being split up? I don't know man, it feels like in the most recent episode the writers were trying to set the stakes up to be so high, but then they weren't actually committing to it. Instead it felt like the characters weren't taking it seriously enough because of their weird, illogical decisions with no explanation. So yeah, those are all the big examples I could think of while making this video, but there's probably so many more out there that I've forgotten about. But when you step back and look at all of these examples together, that's when the real problem becomes obvious. The root cause of all of the rating issues since the time skip. It's not whatsoever that Horizons has bad ideas. In fact, in my opinion, it might have some of the best ideas the Pokemon anime has ever had. A 1-year time skip, legendary Pokemon catchers, the death of a main character, one of the scariest, most threatening villains ever, world-altering stakes, a crew on the run framed as criminals. On paper, this should be the strongest era the series has ever had, but none of it sticks, dude, because the show keeps pulling back. It sets up huge game-changing moments, but then it always softens them, resets them, or just refuses to fully explore the consequences of them. So instead of those moments building up bigger and bigger and pushing the story forwards in exciting ways as it should, everything just ends up feeling temporary and hollow and unimpactful. They have way less consequences and effects on everything than they should. So for me, that's why I think the writing has kind of dropped off since the time skip. The story ideas have gotten bigger, but the impacts of those ideas have gotten smaller, because the writers just aren't committing to them, and that's why Horizons doesn't hit as hard as it used to. But of course, I'm still going to stay hopeful that Horizons can turn it around and end on a really high note. I love this series, and I'm not turning my back on it just because of a temporary issue. So let me know what you think about this topic below, and what do you think went wrong with the post-time skip era? Also be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and join our Discord server using the link in the description. I'd really appreciate it, dude. Thank you so much to all of my incredible channel members on screen right now. That includes the Ferlax fam and the Ferlax fanatics, like Jascadia, Toten, Not Mini, Hope, Shareborn J, Finny, Shiny. You guys are legends. And on that note, thank you all so much for watching, and best wishes until we meet again!